Welcome back. Zimbabweans in Namibia are calling on the US to lift sanctions on their country, describing them as harmful and unfair, especially to ordinary citizens. Joining me now to delve deep into this issue is Arthur Makarutse, who's the chairman of the Zimbabweans Citizens Against Sanctions. Arthur, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
Let's get right into it, Arthur, and talk to us about the intended impact of these sanctions. Do you think that they've been effective, and how, of course, do we measure that?
The sanctions, they have been so much dangerous, should I say, to the Zimbabwean population at large. And not only to the Zimbabwean population, it has even expanded to the region, SADC region. As you are aware that Zimbabwe, as a member state of SADC, it was the one responsible for food security. It was the breadbasket of Africa. But because of the economic sanctions imposed by America, European Union, and the Western allies, this has now caused Zimbabwe not to be able to produce what it's supposed to produce for its own citizens, to produce for the region at large. Not talking of emigration in Zimbabwe. The reason why you see almost in every Southern African country there is a Zimbabwean. Not only that, even in the European countries there is a Zimbabwean. It's because of the impacts of the sanctions back home, which have caused people to now seek greener pastures out of Zimbabwe, because back home unemployment has exceeded even 80%, which is one of the biggest impact of sanctions caused in Zimbabwe.
The US also recently imposed targeted sanctions on several individuals, including President Mnangagwa, citing corruption and human rights issues. So how does this targeted approach affect Zimbabwe's leadership and as well, the ordinary citizen?
You see, one thing about the United States of America, like today we were there at the embassy of the United States. America wants to hide behind the finger. They talk of targeted sanctions, but let me take you back in 2001 when they enacted a law. I don't think you can have a law to target a person. The law targets the masses of Zimbabwe, ZIDERA. I'm talking of ZIDERA Act in 2001. And the main impact caused by ZIDERA is that Zimbabwe cannot access credit lines through IMF, through World Bank, which any sovereign country has the right to access that. But because ZIDERA came into power, and Zimbabwe right now, it doesn't have that access of the financial institutions to run whatever industry, be it agriculture, the mine, the manufacturing, all that has been broken because Zimbabwe is not able to access the credit lines. So when we talk of targeted sanctions, I don't understand how I, as an individual, I should suffer because President Mnangagwa is not allowed to go to America. That does not make sense. Only because the main issue, we took our land back, which is the main reason when we went to war, the idea was to get our land back so that the minority who were owning the land, it will be redistributed to the masses of the Zimbabwean people. When we did that, they came in the hands of targeted sanctions, the human rights being violated, which is not true. Because for me, I wouldn't understand how human rights started being violated only because people have taken back their land. Why were the human rights not being violated before 2001, before we took the land? So the issue of sanctions being targeted, it's unrealistic. That is not true.
Your sentiments obviously are clear that Zimbabwe's political and economic challenges are due to these or linked to these sanctions. How much of this is actually really due to the sanctions and not just poor governing of the country, for example?
Okay. Let me tell you one thing which I experienced today, which I was even laughing out throughout the day. We're at the United States of America, at the embassy here in Windhoek. And when we went there to submit a petition. And when we submitted the petition, the representative, the political officer, who is the representative of the ambassador to Namibia in America, and he told us there are no sanctions. And to our surprise, I asked him a question myself. I asked him a question. How do you say there are no sanctions when there is ZIDERA? What is the data out of all? So coming back to your question, when we come back to Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe, it's a democratic state, it's a sovereign state, which has got a constitution which is fully running as supposed to be in any sovereign state. When we talk of the elections, they are all running just like any other country. So America now comes in, or not America only, European Union also comes in, hiding behind the political situation, political violence, human rights, targeted sanctions. But what is the basis of this? Don't we have a constitution? We have. Is the constitution not being followed? It's being followed. So why sanctioning Zimbabwe is the biggest question. Why we are all over SADC, we are saying these sanctions need to be lifted.
What's civil society in Zimbabwe's view on these sanctions?
Sorry again?
Civil society in Zimbabwe, what's their view on these sanctions?
Okay, let me speak on behalf of the masses, what the masses are saying. On October 25, this year, since 2019, every October 25, the masses have been on the streets every October because SADC declared October 25 as the anti-sanctions day, where all the SADC member states will voice up to air their views in terms of lifting of the sanctions. So in terms of the masses and the civil societies, they are all in one accord, they are all in one voice saying the sanctions need to be lifted with immediate effect.
If these sanctions should be lifted, Arthur, what kind of change would, realistically be expected?
Definitely. The first one, as a youth person, I expect myself to go back home and get employed, because we are talking of 80% of the masses in Zimbabwe are unemployed. These are self-employed people who are in the streets. So the first change I would expect is that industry would start functioning as it is supposed to be. Our agriculture, Zimbabwe should restore its bread basket capacity where it's able to provide the masses of Zimbabwe, the region at large. The mining, we are producing a lot of minerals in Zimbabwe, but we cannot export our minerals to Europe, neither to America. We are only able to access the markets from the eastern side. So if sanctions are removed, definitely we expect more markets to be open so that Zimbabwe is able to market whatever resources which it produces so that we can raise our GDP.
And do you think that the lifting of these sanctions would then reshape Zimbabwe's relationship with the US?
Definitely. That's one thing which we were actually submitting our petition asking from the United States Embassy, that we are ready for any diplomatic dialogue. Like our president, when he came into power in 2018, he made it clear that Zimbabwe is open for business. We are ready to engage. We are ready to re-engage. So one of the main agenda which is in our petition was to call for a diplomatic dialogue. America, we are ready to sit down on a table, in a diplomatic table, where we sit down and share views so that we can air our views according to what they are calling targeted sanctions, human rights violations, so that we can make them understand what type of suffering has these sanctions caused. So definitely Zimbabwe is ready for dialogue with any ally, whether from Europe or from America.
Arthur, your final remarks this evening?
The final remarks today, like I have been saying, we were at the American Embassy here in Windhoek, where we met the political officer who is the representative of the American ambassador. We submitted our petition as the Citizens Against Economic Sanctions who are residing here in Namibia. And the 4 key points which we made it clear in that petition was: 1, the immediate lifting of the sanctions; 2, restoration of the financial access and unhindered humanitarian aid, not forgetting the diplomatic dialogue, that Zimbabwe is open for business and we are ready for dialogue. America, European Union, please, we are tired of these sanctions. May they be removed as soon as possible.
Arthur Makarutse, we appreciate your time here with us this evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Our conversations continue after this break. Stay with us.